Good evening, everybody. Sorry for our late beginning. I can blame some of it on the weather, some of it on the fact that all of our Derech Yitzchayim participants are in Eilat, but I won't give any excuses. I'll just apologize. So, with the limited time we have left before Tfilat Ma'ariv, let me just go over some of the basic things that we've learned about Parshas Mishpatim in the past, and move on from there. So, basically, we've arrived here remarkably at Nasav and Ishma, which is a little bit of a surprise, since Nasav and Ishma seems to be the way that Chazal defined the whole nature of the bris from the beginning, the very thing that characterizes the difference between Klal Yisrael and the Ummah Zo'elam, who ask Ma Kosuv. The question of Nasav and Ishma is the pashtus, the essence of the bris. The truth is that even though in terms of the pashtus of the pasuk, all of the Rishonim give very prosaic explanations of Nasav and Ishma. It's a very strange thing to say Nasav and Ishma. Well, what exactly does that mean? How am I supposed to do? Before I hear, I'll do what I've heard, and I'm committing myself to continue to hear and doing whatever it is that I hear and so on. But all of that, according to Chazal, misses the point. According to Chazal, the issue is that Nasav and Ishma is a completely new madriga that is usually something beyond the power of Bnei Adam, and that it defines so fully the relationship to Klal Yisrael, and that in essence it's an expression of the original Chiddush to Avram Avinu at the moment of Brit. In other words, this Brit, which the Rambam explains in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, is a continuation, direct continuation of the bris and shvua that was made to Avram Avinu, and in fact is never mentioned separately, even to any of the others. Right? We never heard anything about any commitment to a Kabbalah Satira and so on. It just appears within Mishomro et Hashvua Avram Avinu and so on. It doesn't have any of this clarity of being part of the relationship to the others. It comes as an ancillary and as almost taken for granted that this is something that we need in order to be able to be behind the bris of K'nisa La'aretz and so on. So it's part of Koach Ma'asav Igil Yama, but Nachalat Guyim. This Iker bris at that moment came with the words Yisalech Lefanai Ve'yeh Tamim. Yisalech Lefanai is Nasav and Ishma, because what it means is, as Rashi says in Parshas Noach, it's the opposite of walking hand in hand with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's going in front of him. How in the world do you walk in front? What does Yitalech Lefanai mean? To be able to say Naaseh before Nishma is to walk in front. It's because of that no Malach is capable of this. It's only Malachei Hasharei specifically that are capable of such a thing. So we just said that, and that's the nature of Sherus. When we're talking about Sherus, it's always in terms of anticipation. It's never in terms of just response. So fine, so to be an Eved B'Alma, responses are enough. I tell you to do this, and you do what I tell you. But in order to be a Malach HaShareis, you need to be able to anticipate what would be needed. And we will see that is very central to the entire idea of what is going on here in the Parsha. Why it's so much a part of Mishpatim and not of Yisro, where it should have been the place where it appeared. And according to Rashi, of course, the Seder Hadvarim is that it actually did appear, because Rashi understands that the whole Seder is completely different from the way it's presented in the Torah. We'll get to that in a moment. So the difference between the Goyim, who will ask, and this is built into the nature of Nishma, to Nasa, as opposed to the Nishma. Because the moment that you are committed only to an Asiya that is defined by someone else's Amira, as opposed to this ability to jump in, you need to know what's involved. So you need to ask Ma Katuvba. The problem is that the moment that you ask Ma Katuvba, you've rejected Nasa and Ishma by definition, because what you've said is that I'm not really interested. What I need to know is whether I can live with this. So if it jives with the way I see reality, first tell me what it says, and I'll figure out So then basically you're telling me it doesn't matter what I say. Insofar as what I say is consonant with what you say, so it's okay. So what do we need is, where's the bris in that? I understand. You're going to listen to what I say as long as it confirms what you already know. What's the point of our talking? I'm not interested in that. So by definition, the moment you ask those words, so that's why we have those funny Gemaras, right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, well, it says you can't murder. I can't murder. Whoever heard of say, instead, there's plenty of things you could say to the guy if you want them to say, I can't handle that. You could say, every 7 years you have to starve to death. You can't plant anything. And that should handle it pretty neatly, Never mind, I think I can handle that. That's Giborei Kayach is Nasav and Ishmas Keneged Shvius. Tell them about Shvius. No, I'm telling about Lutzirza.
You have to sit with Sukkah and stuff.
Okay.
The famous Don Nichols. He came to the Jews. How much does it cost? It's free? I'll take 2. 2 tablets. And then to everybody else.
Okay. Listen, at least Rava used to be Paseach B'divrei, B'dichusa. Okay, so we had Rava B'dichusa. I didn't find it funny, but as long as everybody finds it funny, it's Divrei B'dichusa. And now we were Yotze, and now we be Yoshev, Be'ema, Be'yura, Be'zera, and now we can learn. Good. So, therefore, the ability to be Salech Lefanai, which, as Rashi says, is the definition of the difference. This is all the way back at the beginning. Is the definition of the difference between a Ben Neach and a Ben Yisrael. In that it's Eser, like Salech Neach, as opposed to Salech Lefanai, is not surprisingly brought out by the Metzias of Kabbalah Satera. So that the very same Umas Ha'elam that's only Eser Elokim will have to ask, so what does it say, L'maisa? Whereas the nature of Yisrael is that they're capable of, as the Medrash says, Migi lalavanai razet. This is not normal. How do you figure such a thing out? Because even a malach can't figure this out. A normal malach can't figure this out. It doesn't make any sense. Right? Only malachei hasharis have that particular reshus to be mishares. That's an amazing schus, because that's a different level, completely different madrega of being. To be able to be misharet means that it's built into the nature of your appreciation of what it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu is thinking, so to speak, needing, so to speak. And that's all together this ultimate shmiya, not just simply doing as told, but shmiya svira, as the Gemara says. Right? So shmiya li is lo svirali. That getter, I understand this. And that obviously is the nature of Sheirus. As you hire a butler, and you come the next morning and you say, good Lord, Alfie, the bath is cold. You didn't tell me to make a bath. Good Lord, Alfie, there's no coffee. You didn't tell me to make any coffee. Good Lord, Alfie, my robe and my slippers. You didn't tell me I needed a robe and slippers. Good Lord, Alfie, there's no morning paper. You didn't tell me you like to read the morning paper. You understand that Alfie's out on his rear end in no time at all. That's not a butler. I can hire anybody to do what I tell him to do. The whole point is I don't want to tell him to do. So therefore it's the getter of Malachei Hasharis. That's the Metzias. If that's the case, it really, really distinguishes. It's just a detail in, a new, nice level. Wow, how lovely. They didn't have to say Nasav and Ishmael. That's the Metzias of Torah. And of course, that ends up becoming the whole meaning of the Parshas. We'll see. And yet, it wasn't there before, and it's only here now. So that already tells us we're dealing with the Iker Chefetz of the bris is coming into focus now. Here, after Mishpat. And yet, the way children look at it is the way that, as the Medrash says, the way people looked at it. That's the Miboker la'erev yukatu, mibli mesim la'datzach yovedu. From it was all very nice. We're sitting there in the morning, Kabul Torah, Everybody's thinking about the Samach Hashem Elokecha, these tremendous Seides in the Luchais, we all understand everything. And basically, by the night, you got to, because they had to start being Isaac and Mishpatim. It's no fun anymore. So now that the fun is over. So up until now, we could tell the kids the stories of the Torah, put them to bed, put them to bed with Noach and with Avram and with Yitzchak and with Yaakov. Yes, Mitzrayim, you need us, Mitzrayim is wonderful. Try putting your kids to bed with Shosh and Nagach Sapora. You're going to have a real problem on your hands. Okay, so this is obviously they'll go to sleep. They won't go out in the first place. So it seems there's a totally different ambience that begins here in the Torah. And this different ambience, which looks like it starts here, actually starts before. That before is very much the same problem of the Nasiv and Ishma issue. Why didn't the Nasiv and Ishma appear before? And that's basically a beautiful Meshech Chochmah. The Meshech Chochmah points out, let me see how this works. Can we get a Meshech Chochmah? But you have to erase the old search? That's not good. Kind of chutzpah is that?
That's the X.
Oh, you just press X. That's wonderful. Okay, good. Yes, comes out. Can't do that. Meshech Chochmah. I like that. Not bad at all. So, the Meshech Chochmah says that, good. So Meshech Chochmah says beautiful Nekudas B'daik in the Lashon. I always love to quote this Meshech Chochmah as the introduction to Yisrael. So he says, "B'chodesh hashlishi," it says B'nei Yisrael, "Hamitbonein yireh kizein b'chol haTorah tugumas." There's no such thing anywhere in the Torah. Starting in the middle of nowhere with the words something, without a vav, without a vayi, it's absolutely unheard of. Either you need a vav achivu, or you need a vayihi. I mean, why does it say vayihi b'chodesh hashlishi? Let's say B'nei Yisrael. The only possible at times that such thing happens, let's say Bahar, of course, over there, you are already matchil inyan, but Bahar, you're missing b'chukotah. So therefore, you don't need a vav. Seim b'chukotah telechu, and so on. But over here, it's matchil, k'mo b'bereshit. He wants to bring a raya to Rashi from here, that the Rashi understands that the Sefer HaMishpatim, the Sefer HaBrit, which included the Mishpatim, are the words of the Torah from Bereshis Bar Elokim until now, but this is a new Sefer. Not like the Rambam. Ad Kedei Kach, he's convinced that this is the meaning of the point is I'm starting a new book. So again, I mean, to us it seems in terms of the ambience maybe, the ambience changes so profoundly in Mishpatim, and in reality, the Torah is making it clear that, look, the new beginning is not here. The new beginning was actually that if we had just sat there, Bifnei Har Sinai, V'lo kibalnu es haTorah, Dayenu is sufficient, and that's B'chodesh HaShlishi. And that's where everything changes. So our entire tfisa of reality begins there. So that means that the entire chelik between B'chodesh HaShlishi, that beginning of that new book, with everything that comes between until, you know where we're going here. I mean, so we're going to include Truma, and we're going to include Tetzaveh, and we're going to be starting Kitisa, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the Kitisa, we get back to the words that close the parsha over here, Vayisham Bahar Bo'im Yom, Vayisham Bahar Bar Bo'im Yom, end with the words that began the story of the Aliyah, which is Lech Reid. It goes from Lech Reid to Lech Reid, one from the Egel, one for the Yonim of Gvulais, and as we know, those two things are profoundly interrelated, because basically the Lech Reid was the reassertion of the tzivui of the Gvulais on Har Sinai. And the kilkol on Har Sinai, as we know, only came through Vayechazu et Elohim, Vayechlu, Vayishtu. And somehow or other, that is Nogea, what immediately comes the second Lech Reid, because that's the violation of Mechitzas, which carries us all the way through to Parsha Shmini, with the reconstruction of Mechitzas, the death of really Achri Mos, and further as we trace it, but certainly to the moment of the Totzaot of that horrible Maisa, which is the death of Nadav, and that happens here, but it happens here in Vayechazu et Elokim Vayechlu V'Yishto, which is here, and not in the parsha of the assertion of the Gvulot, which is Yisro. So again, there's some type of big phenomena in how the entire story holds together as one. And this is even mentioned in the Haftarah, basically. This is the Bitrei HaEgel, when the worlds that have to do with over here, because that's where we're up to. We're up to Leichrei. Those closing words of the Arboim Yom, Arboim Laila, end with the Tzivoy of Shabbos, and then the sudden change and the Leichrei. So the question is, what is really the relationship between the first part and the second part? I mean, on the simplest level, the question is, of course, what is the relationship? Just start the presentation of the Torah. Is it chronological? Is it non-chronological? I mean, this one is a major machlokas rishonim. It's a machlokas tanoim. It's a machlokas amoraim. Goes through our entire history, this machlokas. And I mean, the way Rashi learns it, everybody who learns the Torah with the pshat of Rashi has a vision of a very strange back and forth order. Right? So we're talking about, we start off with there we are, in the Chodesh HaShlishi, and we haven't heard anything about the Shisha Yomim, we're going to find out afterwards. Actually, there were Shisha Yomim before, and then this was maybe Bayom HaShvi, but of course that's really a machlokas of the Gemara between Rabbi Yosef Glili and Rabbi Akiva, so maybe, it could be that Vayechasehu means Vayechasehu Lahar, Shisha Yomim, don't know. But it could be Vayechasehu L'Moshe, maybe because of the Hachona for Knisa to Machane Shechina, in which case it comes afterwards, because it's talking about the Knisa for Arboim Yom. Don't know. Machlokas, very good. So who knows? The very end of the parsha may actually belong right after Chodesh HaShlishi, because we're talking about B'Yom Hazeh, which is Rosh Chodesh, but then we have the Shisha Yomim is Rosh Chodesh. Of course, that depends what the Kabbalah Satera was, but that's also machlokas. Depending on that, what is it, the 6th day or was it the 7th day? So according to Rashi, actually the whole story of Mishpatim was happening between Chodesh HaShlishi and the first Leichrei, right? Because Rashi understands that the bris was all done before, and the reading from the Sefer HaBris was all done before. And then the only thing that we find that comes afterwards is really the part about Moshe Amar Allah. Allah is the second Allah. You have to be Makabel Shar HaTorah, but that itself is machlokas. So, okay, everything is completely out of order. We keep going back and forth with this very strange picture going round and round in circles, and we get back to Yitro, and then back to Mishpatim, and then further back to Yitro, further ahead in Mishpatim. Very strange kind of graph, which mathematically is an interpolation, basically. So we're going around in circles like this, and that's why the Ramban says this is crazy. I mean, why in the world would we do this? Hey, Mukta Mukhar B'Torah is only where you need to say Mukta Mukhar B'Torah. Why do we need to say Mukta Mukhar B'Torah? And hey, Tivli or Oz, Rebbe Ezra, everything is Kesidro. Well, why can't everything be Kesidro? And whoever heard of such a thing, that Mishpatim, that Moshe writes all of the Mishpatim, and he's misaper all the Mishpatim in the Sefer HaBrit, and the Mishpatim that are being referred to, according to Rashi, since Mishpatim was never said, Mishpatim that are being referred to are the Mishpatim of Mora, of all ridiculous things. So why does it say Vayisaper? Vayisaper means something new. It's always something new. It's how to review. That's the meaning of Vayisaper. I'm telling you, wow, this is amazing. Maybe it's amazing. I heard this a long time ago. So how could it be referring to Mora? Why would it be referring to Mora? And this is just basically everything goes exactly in order. We have all of the inyanim of the dibrais that are in the luchos, and then we come step by step to define the luchos, and actually goes through the mitzvahs of the immediately after the Yerida. So to Moshe, go tell them, Atem Ra'item, and that Atem Ra'item, that's Keneged Anoch Hashem Lokecha, and the not Lo Ra'item Kol Tmuna, and that's Keneged Lo Yelecha, and it goes through each one of the mitzvahs, so we finally get to Mishpatim. Mishpatim is Keneged Lo Tachmod, because it's to define the nature of Balut, so that's essentially what Balut is. the understanding of what belongs to somebody else, and what belongs to you, which of course in the broadest sense is a deeper understanding of the nature of machitzas, but that's not our business right now. And then we go to, now that we've taught them this, and now they have to make a decision, so everybody's called together. So do you want to get involved in this or not? And everybody says, yes, we want to get involved. That's not so nishma. And then we have the Zrikas Adam. First we have the Zrikas Adam in the Mizbeach. The other Chatzi Adam is in the Aganot. We're waiting to hear the response. You ready to go? Yeah, we're ready to go. And then there's the Knesset Labrit with Aganot, which is always what we do. We split things in that fashion. And then Moshe goes up to be Makabel Ras Torah. What's wrong? I understand. It makes perfectly good sense. And in fact, the way that he understands it is we bring here. He says, look, it's true that there's Mechilta, of course, the Mechilta has this strange understanding, it's very cute, that the nature of the original, the things that are left out in Yitro, which appear here in the end, was sort of a Kabbalah, but without really getting the mitzvahs yet, because we're going back tomorrow. So what happens is it's something of a trick, because what happens is after there's a Kabbalah of that, say for Abrit, which is really just for Bereshit, which seems pretty innocuous, So then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, okay, so now Atem Kshurim, Tfusim, V'anuvim. Try to get out of it now. Might as well just go all the way. All right, fine. So we'll be the Kabbalah the Torah. But he says that's not. We should follow Rabbi Yossi. What he says is lahalacha. Uses the word lahalacha. Shomar ka'alacha, meaning that he, like it says in the Mishnah, uses shomar ka'alacha means, he said it straight. Okay, so obviously there are different visions of this. It's not. It's not at all clear. It's very nice that Ramban is convinced, but the fact that the Tanaim and Amoraim are not convinced, and the Hilt is not convinced, the Gemara is not convinced. There's obviously Dvarim Begod. Something important is going on over here.
Just technically, according to Rashi, what happened? He came down and then he went straight back up. It was
for what, on Yom HaShvi? Yeah, but that's a Gemara. That's also the Gemara. It depends, how it goes. No, that's what it says. Therefore, that's why the Vayimi Mocharat. There was no Vayimi Mocharat. Fine. The Machlokas extends, although it doesn't seem to be related between the Ramban and Rashi, to how to understand the strange interjection of Hinei Anochi Sholech Leflechem Malach Al Tamer Bo, which Rashi understands, and the Ramban traces. So where did Rashi get that from? Because he thinks it's completely wrong. Right? So he says he's confusing two different Midrashim, basically two different Gemaras. Rashi understands. He puts together the Kishmi Bikirbo with the Gemara about Matat, and therefore his Shmi is the Gematria of the Shem Hashem, and that it's Merames to the Malach, which is the Sarah Elam, called in other circumstances. And this was the Malach that was sent to Yoshua. And to Yoshua, the Malach says, Anisar Tzva Hashem Hatabati. Why Hatabati? So he's confusing that better. He says, Hatabati. When I came to Moshe Rabcha, he refused to accept me. But now, now I'm here. When he refused to accept me, and it's the Al Ta'alenu Mizeh, Al Ta'alenu Mizeh. Therefore, here must be Merames, too, according to Rashi. Khan is the Besura that Sofam Lachto, which lends greater credence to the Lech Reid and the Lech Reid connections. So we're messiahing this story with the Arida for the Maisa Ega. Now, according to Rashi, that makes a great deal of sense, if that's what's happening. So then we need to know that, look, in the end, it's not going to be so pashut like you think. And I'm going to have to send a malach along with you instead of going myself, because you won't be able to maintain this madrega. What exactly it has to do with Yisro versus Mishpatim versus Yisro, that isn't clear. But at least it has something to do with the story here and now, the way Rashi is understanding it. And The Ramban, of course, points out, why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu say, Hinei Anochi Sholech Lechem Malach, if it never happened? Because if the way Rashi is understanding it, it's that Malach, then Moshe Rabbeinu rejected it, and he ended up being mispal, and in the end, there wasn't a Malach. So the Torah is being mavaseh that I'm going to send a Malach when he doesn't send the Malach. What would be the point of such? Therefore, the Ramban says, look, Al Pi Ha'emes, it's a completely different element, totally different element. And actually, this is the Malach, that's the Malach, HaMalach HaGoeloti Mikorah. And this is the Malach that was with the Avos. And essentially, it's the way in which we understand the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Bria B'Chol. So that the presence of the Shechina, as opposed to the Shem HaGadol, is part of the expression of Midas Hadin, which is expressed through Malchus, is a reference to what it's talking about, and not Chas v'Shalom has anything to do with Chait. But on the contrary, the ability to translate the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the world and into nature and everything else that is built into the nature of our reality, which takes us all the way to Purim and to the Getter of Nes Nister and to its relationship to Teva and so on. That's what it's referring to over here. What Rashi is confusing is the story of Gavriel. So that essentially the Malach, who's a Meira Derech, is supposed to be Gavriel as a source of Midas Hadin, that was actually rejected and only shows up as the Sar Tzva Hashem to Yoshua. And the reason that it's not necessary here is because Moshe was that. Since Moshe was a Mora Derech, which of course leads us directly to the Egel, that's the whole point. Kizeh Moshe ish lo yadanu ma hayelo. And as Ramban points out, that was the whole Kashash in the Midbar was from that Midah, and that's why Shor is always on the Tzaf and the Merkava, and that's why they were Chayshish for that Midah, and that's why they made the Egel, and Egel is considered to be Shor. And we know that, of course, that's what we're addressing at the Mishkan because of the fact that in Yecheskel, the Shor is switched, really, in the Merkava for a Kruv, and that's exactly what we're addressing, is the Shor in the Merkava, because of Ein Kateger Nasi Saneger and the Tefillah of Yecheskel and Aficha of the elements that were part of Har Sinai into a Mishkan in which everything now is back to normal, so to speak, except we got rid of the essential Hashpah, which is expressed through Shor, and we translated it to Yenukan and Ze'er Anpin in Kabbalistic terms, the small face that's supposed to be the picture of the crew. Okay. But according to the Ramban, that's what it is. It isn't clear why necessarily it comes here yet. We'll have to make sense of that. Why does it, in fact, come here? But it has nothing in common with the Getter of Gavriel that appears later on. That's a complete mistake, according to me. We have very, very powerful differences. And, I mean, the way that Rashi is learning it, and no matter how we learn it, the bottom line is, whatever the actual chronology is, the presentation of the Torah is very strange. The presentation is basically taking us back to Na'aseh V'Nishma when we don't only discover at the end, but that itself is very weird. And as we saw before, the Gedorim that were there, let's say the idea of the Gvules of Har Sinai. Why do we wait till the end to hear Vayachazu et Elokim Vayachlu Vayishtu? Unless, of course, that's referring to other Gvules. That's talking about the Aliyah, the second Aliyah that was going to be Makabel Torah itself. Okay, that's also a Machlokas. That's strange. One of the weirdest things we talked about last week, how it is that the Messiah of the Psukim in Yisro is so deeply Yisro oriented because it is Yonadav. And the Remez, of course, is Yonadav. That's the whole story of the Bnei Rechav and the Talmidim of Yisro, and how it is that the Talmidim of Yisro becomes the restorer of the halachas that Moshe Rabbeinu brought down and Yoshua forgot, and so on. Unbelievably, the Haftorah that we read from is the story of Yonadav ben Rechav, except that we stop early. The Teimanim bedafka read the story of Yonadav ben Rechav of Mishpatim. Despite the fact that the Messiah has the remes to Yonatan right where it should be. I mean, it's got to with Yisro. Yisro doesn't appear in Mishpat. It's so weird. It's just something everybody's taken for granted. That we've got this strange, specific, non-chronological, as we saw last week, we're talking about an acronism, right? The real word anachronism, which now in people's mind means something else. But the real sense of anachronism that goes through all the way with the parshas of Mishkan, we're not sure what came first, the Egel, the Mishkan, what exactly is the response to it? This keeps on going, takes us through really all the way through the reconstruction of our vision of the Mishkan after Kitisa until we get to the end, really to the end of Shemot. So there's something that is aggressively anachronistic. And the truth is that, as we saw, that aggressive anachronism is there for a very special reason. And that is that in the same way that we know Chazal tells us that the Mokum Ha'orein is Eina Min Hamida, we're talking about the nature of space, because there we're talking about the early part of the Mishkan before it becomes Moed-oriented, which deals with time. In terms of the space of the Mishkan, it doesn't matter where you would measure from the wall to the Aron on any side. There was never any room for the Aron. The Aron was not placeable in three-dimensional space. It existed in hyperspace. The same thing here becomes clear is the meaning of bris in terms of time. Bris does not exist within time, specifically ordered time, chronology. And the deeper meaning of Ein Mukta Memucher B'Torah is not that the Torah has other concerns besides specific chronology. It means that it's irrelevant to these sugyas. The time in which it occurs is totally meaningless, because what we're looking for is something that apparently exists outside of the simple way that we take time as meaning the fact that we don't want all things to take place at once. But because of that, it has to have a specific arrow of time. That arrow of time is something that is not necessary in terms of Mishpat. So that means that we're looking over here in these parshas, we're looking at two different elements of bris, which are Yisro and Mishpat. We're not looking at a structured time in which we go from step one to step two and so on. That isn't the issue. We're looking at things that are really interpolated. In other words, we do go round and round with the specific element showing up as points on a graph within a broader structure. And that means that there's no real way that we're supposed to be teasing them apart. Because just as every issue of Brit always takes two things, and it's basically you pass between them, right? Whether it's the B'Isra Ego, Hashem Yishmar, or whether it's the Bris Ben Absorim, but there's always a getter of walking down the aisle. And that's the concept of bris. That's why we walk down the aisle at a wedding, even Goyim understand that. Bris consists of defining a path in which reality around you stands at the side. And that's the vision that people have of bris. So that the going between the bisarim is the creation of bris. It's amazing. One of the most powerful of the application of that idea of bris being specifically walking down an aisle. I mentioned this many years ago, was in the movie Stand By Me. Stand By Me is a getter of the crease of a bris of Ne'emonos, which it announces at the beginning of the movie is like something that is Ne'emonos v'yoyla. So these are the reach of re'avicha kind of thing, right? And the entire movie essentially takes place between train tracks, right? So that the idea, and even a bridge, so that you can't even get off to the side. If the train is coming, you're in big trouble. And that becomes like a moment of great suspense in the movie, right? But the idea is that you are walking down to discover your future. And along that path, there's this discovery of the nature of tznius and the nature of loyalty and so on. All is within a structure of bris. So there's this primal relationship, as there are to many such ideas. There's a primal relationship that has to do with the breaking of the waters and the Yam Suf, and the breaking of the waters in the Yarden, and the nature of Basulim and Karka Basula, and taking out the Avonim. All of these things relate to this passing through. So when we talk about passages, those passages are what define things. Okay, so we have over here the two elements of bris here. Again, on the simplest level, those two elements would represent, in terms of Yisro, the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? So we're standing there, and you have the unbelievable sound and light show on Har Sinai, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, and everybody is terrified, and then the Malachim are Yidodu, and okay, but in Yisro, in Mishpatim, it's exact opposite. In Mishpatim, you have the presence of Elohim as Dayanim, as humans, not at all as you had it in Yisro, and Adarabah. So the question is sitting down in the Beis Medrash, and Ela Mishpatim Asher Tasim Lifneihem, and who are the people, and what are the rules in terms of very prosaic issues. Again, Shoshanaga Chesapora, it certainly seems very far removed from all the sound and light show on Har Sinai. So that in a sense, one represents, usually that's the bris, one represents one side of the brit, and the other represents the other side of the brit, and walking between them, you're giving yourself over to living within that space. So that becomes the mokum of the bris. So that's the simplest level, is to be able to see it on that basis. Again, a more complex level, which makes it much more powerful. And yet there's obviously more to this, more complex level. You're very tired today. So why are you sitting like this? Huh? Uh-huh. I thought you have to smile. Oh, you figured the Ritet Vazea means you can't smile anymore because Rabbanei already killed. I hear. So what would be a more down-to-earth kind of thing? I mean, the tremendous transition that happens from this point on is a transition that took place in human nature, really, and certainly in human experience of reality, in which Yisro, the period of Yisro alone, is very similar to the early human belief in a Platonic vision of reality. So how does Plato see reality? He sees us as being essentially cavemen, right? So we're living in a cave. What we experience as reality is not reality. It's reflections of real relationships that are ideal relationships. And anything that exists in Elam Hazeh is just a pale flickering, which we get every once in a while. We get a flicker of light into our cave, and we see the reflections of reality on the wall of the cave, and from that we attempt to extrapolate. So what is reality really like? And that's a reality that exists outside, which we have very little chance of being part of. We can just try to figure out from the distance. But the question of being able to live within such a reality is very rochik. And this is the way that the world progressed or didn't progress, also the Dark Ages essentially, in which there was very little sense that there's anything that a human being can do in a participatory sense, in some way capable of really experiencing a connection to all of this. Because essentially reality exists from outside of you. And what you do is, you lead your life as much as possible within the type of ideas that allow you to approximate, at least to know where you're living, and to understand what is right, and what is moral, and what is good. There certainly is no room for fun, and there certainly is no room for poetry and all kinds of stuff like that. And because of that, of course, Plato was interested in banishing the artists and the poets unless they kept a very strict censorship and they did what the state ordered them to do. And that way it would inculcate the correct morals for children and so on. We can't have them, after all, sitting around and listening to the Beatles or to Mordechai Ben David or anything like that. So therefore we're going to, we can either kill them, make sure they're not Mikalka the youth, or exile them or whatever. But everybody has this vision of Plato, the great liberal, and so no, that's not the way. Fine. All right. So basically, for many, many centuries, this was the mark that Greece left on our Toda'ah. So even the desire to try to make some sense of the nature of reality basically resulted in a taxonomy, So what are you left with? You're left with your thoughts about this reality. You're left with trying to structure the differences and so on. So Aristotle puts everything into the different books, It's all very Masudar and so on. To say that there's a fundamental connection to an underlying reality, and, it's very difficult for him. And what is he left with? He's left with Boichsvaras. I mean, from a Boichsvara, the brain becomes a radiator, It comes from the Boich to the brain. Okay, why not? I mean, it's pretty hot up there. That would be a good usage of a brain, I suppose. It looks like a radiator, So. Whatever, I'm good, What are you going to do?
What are those flashes of light?
So those flashes of light, the Rambam talks about in terms of the lightning in the Agdam and Marinavuchim. Yeah.
But how does people understand why do we get?
Okay, we only have 5 minutes left. I want to just finish at least this brief introduction. I'm sorry. So, but what happened at the beginning of the Renaissance, the development of science, is what happens in Mishpatim, because the difference between the computer has really been eating badly, I suppose. Oh, it was from there? Oh, I see. So that one's been eating. We're talking about books. So what happens? What happens is something amazing, because what happened was that the development of first what appeared to be nothing but completely abstracted relationships, which became known as mathematics, and gradually started to develop, all of a sudden became clear to people that these are not just relationships of numbers, but they actually are instantiated and concretized in the reality in which we live. That came as an utter shock, and it remains a shock today. That's why in the world is it that mathematics, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with anything, should actually define the way everything concrete and physical, anything that we meet in the world, any force, any object, any type of interrelationship is definable by these numbers. Why in the world should that be? And why should it be something that we should understand, Bichlal? And this, Einstein put it also, it's the great mystery. Why do we have an ability to what it appears to be to understand the underlying relationships that turn themselves into particles, into quantum mechanics, into gravity, into forces, into whatever? It responds exactly to how it is that we envisioned it before we even knew about it. We were never even chayshid that there was some kind of connection between the two. And all of a sudden comes along Newton and makes the first basic connections, Galileo, and I don't know, things start growing until it turns out that there's millions upon millions of these relationships that don't make any sense whatsoever. And all we need to do is solve our equation, and we discover the most amazing things about the nature of reality, really primal reality. Right? So we discover the underlying nature of forces, the interrelationship between mass and energy. I mean, how do we do that? By solving the equation, So when you look at the results of your equation, you say, oh, that can't be. Must have solved wrong. M equals MC. And that doesn't make sense, right? E equals MC squared. I mean, how's that possible? Just by simplifying the equation. Like, well, all of a sudden the whole world changes. Well, I mean, it's mad, such a thing. And yet, that's the way it goes. And this remains one of the most astonishing mysteries. The moment you have that, you have the equivalent in nature of the relationship of Teresh Balpeh to Teresh B'Ksav. Because remember that the idea of Mishpat means that I am capable of making sense of things. That's all it means. In other words, the difference between Chok and Mishpat is not in its reality, as the Rambam points out, both in Chosbila and also in Tmura, that you're mochuyev to do whatever you can on both levels, in both in terms of understanding or assigning tamim. Because the idea over here is not to claim that you understand anything, it's just to make it make sense. In sense, of course, people think that taimei mitzvahs mean reasons. Taimei doesn't mean reasons. It means sense, to taste something. Taste is a sense. So basically, it begins to seem that some of these chukim are actually embedded in our natures. It becomes part of the way the world evolves. Okay, so we understand those simple chukim become part of our nature, maybe because they're useful. So I don't know, not to sleep with your mother doesn't make any sense in terms of, I don't know. I mean, it's pure chok, essentially. And yet I feel it's not right to sleep with my mother for some reason. Why would I feel such a thing? Because it's useful in terms of the development of life, right? So we need to keep a broader gene pool. It's on its own. Okay, I understand that. To me, it makes sense not to steal, even though it's sort of ridiculous because, I try to get ahead with everything else. Why in the world wouldn't I want to steal? It's the best way to get ahead. Let everybody else do the work and you come and take it, no? When it comes to war, we steal. When it comes to slavery, we steal. So we steal all the time. Somehow or other, I feel it isn't right to steal. I'm assuming that it wouldn't take too many generations to knock out genes that are good for stealing because they don't live long enough to get children. They've got a tough time getting back into the gene pool because they all get knocked off very early when big monkey knocks off little monkey who went ahead and took away banana. So very early on, you get rid of the steal. Okay, all right. So there's this interrelationship. But when you discover, my God, everything relates to the way that I'm able to understand fundamental relationships. That's sense in a much deeper meaning of sense. And now all of a sudden, the world is winking to you, right? Come on in. So now you have connection to it. You can't have bris without connection. That's the nature of bris. So unless there's that sensuality in which I can actually translate it into the concrete world and into the concrete me, I can't be shaykh to bris at all. Which is why the entire nature of bris is always in terms of ava, in terms of throwing yourself in, and that becomes the nasa v'nishma. You can't say nasa v'nishma if shmiya means only I'll do what I'm told. So unless it makes sense, and unless I have an approach to things, it's not shaykh for there to be bris. Before we come to Mishpatim, the concept of nasa v'nishma is indecipherable. What would it mean to say nasa v'nishma? I have no connection to this. You want to tell me something? Oh, great Lord, tell me something. It's only when it's clear to me that, as the Zohar says, there's that beautiful girl at the window winking at you and giving you a come on. So that's either your mathematics, that's either your love of nature, or whatever it is. Little boy, come on in because there's something for you here. And that is the getter of Torah, that the Torah shows herself and winks at you as a beautiful girl. There's something in this for me. I desire this. I can come to all kinds of relationships through this, and I want this. At that point, it's possible to discuss bris. I will run to Meyer and come out afterwards and continue on. Sorry, it took up so much time.